Hello, and welcome to the Privileged Access Management overview for the 12-port platform. 12-port is software which you can install and deploy yourself on any standard Windows or Linux server. We offer modules for both PAM and microsegmentation, but this video will strictly focus on the PAM-related features. I'll introduce various key elements such as the asset database, privileged remote sessions, and role-based access control, and by the end you should have a basic understanding of how the 12-port PAM system works. So to begin, we've logged into the 12-port admin console, and just to give a quick overview of how the interface is organized, you can see we have a standard dashboard front and center that shows some of the more immediate analytics. Then we have a variety of menu options on the left. We can manage key PAM and microsegmentation controls, configure lower level system policies, and integrate with various other systems for things like identity and authentication. Since I'm an administrator, everything is visible, but we can actually customize the visibility of these modules and menu options based on role, so that users who log into 12-port only see the parts of the interface they need to see for a more streamlined experience. So we'll get started with our overview of PAM, and we'll do that from the asset database. The asset database is where the records for all of the endpoints and accounts on your network are stored and managed. To help onboard these assets, we have an import tool with a variety of integrations. So you can connect to an LDAP server, VMware host, your cloud like AWS or Azure, and discover assets either on a one-time basis or periodically. So that way new systems that come online are automatically onboarded into the 12-port database. Once your assets are in the database, you can configure them in a variety of ways, control which users and groups have access to which resources, and well, ultimately this is where users will launch privileged remote access sessions. Let's see what that looks like. I have this access destinations container in my database, and if we look inside, we see a handful of assets that are ready for remote access. There's several supported access protocols ranging from common options like SSH and RDP to VNC and Telnet. We also support a broad range of asset types. Some of these just correspond to different server operating systems. You see here, for example, we have Windows, Linux, IBM I and AIX, as well as Solaris. But there's a few asset types that represent some more unique modes of access. For instance, we have this web portal asset type that brokers sessions to web-based admin consoles using browser isolation. And we also support RDS, where we'll connect to a Windows remote app and autofill credentials. Now, most of these modes of access are outside the scope of this introductory video, but we will still see a basic privileged access example shortly. For now, let's look more closely at one of these assets to understand how they're structured. We'll use this Windows server as an example. If we look through each field here, we'll see that there's a host name, a set of main asset credentials, which is just the local Windows administrator in this case. Then we have these tags, which offer a way to attach metadata to an asset and establish a sort of logical identity for it. This is useful, of course, for organizational purposes, but tagging also plays a crucial role in our approach to microsegmentation, so we'll come back to it to discuss it in a bit more detail shortly. The final piece we have here is the member assets associated with this Windows Server asset. These serve as alternate credentials, which we could use for remote access or for script execution. And there's a few notable things about these accounts in particular. The first account is another local administrator on the server, which was actually obtained automatically by our account discovery script. This is a really effective tool if you have a lot of privileged accounts in your network that you'd like to onboard. The second account down here is not a local account, but it's a domain account, which was imported from my LDAP server that I integrated with. So that's the asset structure. Now what can we do with these assets? Well, if we look at the Manage menu, quite a few things. But the interesting options for now are the ones related to access control. So that happens in a couple places. First, there's workflows, which offer a way to create just-in-time privileges for various ways a user might interact with an asset, whether it be editing the asset, checking out a password, or launching a remote session. Next, we have access profiles, which define how a user or group can access an asset, what kind of actions are allowed inside their remote sessions, and also how much activity is recorded in the audit trail for compliance purposes. You can configure both of these access control mechanisms across your asset database by taking advantage of powerful inheritance structures. So you can assign them on a basis that's as coarse or granular as you'd like. Once your assets are configured and the proper privileges have been assigned, authorized users can launch privileged remote sessions. Now, there's various restrictions you might face at this point depending on how workflows and access profiles were configured. For example, you might have to submit a workflow request and be approved first, or you might be challenged for MFA before access. However, my administrator account can proceed without any of these restrictions, and you'll see we can go ahead and launch an RDP session into this Windows Server asset. So that was privileged remote access via the web, but that isn't our only option. 12-port also includes a proxy, which we can use to connect to an asset using a native remote access client. I have the Windows RDP client here, and I can use it to create a privileged session into that same Windows Server asset. To do this, I enter a username string comprised of my 12-port username and the unique ID of the target asset, which is displayed in the asset view in the 12-port interface. I'll then be prompted for a password. And remember, I'm using my personal 12-port credentials here. The same principle still applies here, where I never know the password of the privileged account on the destination asset, and the PAM system is retrieving it from the vault and injecting it for me. And as you can see, once I click OK, it will connect me to the asset just as before. Now let's look at these remote sessions from the auditing side. We could open the asset level session report to see a complete history of all remote sessions performed on this asset. As a PAM administrator, we have several ways of interacting with these sessions and gathering insights from them. We can see some of these in the Actions menu. First, you'll notice that if a session is still in progress, we're able to terminate or join the session as either a viewer or collaborator at any time. For these older sessions that have already been completed, we can still view a full video playback as long as it's been enabled by the corresponding access profile. We could also look at the session events report, which shows us a more distilled record of the session by listing just the critical events that took place within it. These are things like file and clipboard transfers and keyboard input. That concludes our basic PAM overview, but we have many other resources that cover the platform in more detail. If you want to learn more about our features, you could refer to the other videos in the 12-port overview series, or check out our public documentation at docs.12port.com. You could also download the free trial using the directions in the documentation. It can be installed in just 5 minutes, and you'll have access to all of the features you've seen here, so you can continue experimenting on your own. Thanks for watching.